quiet, unassuming fire station in Livermore, California, a solitary light bulb has been burning almost continuously since the year 1901. Known as the Centennial light, this clear, hand-blown bulb with a prominent carbon filament is a glowing, undeniable testament to the incredible durability of early industrial engineering. It was built in an era when manufacturers actively competed to create the longest-lasting, highest-quality products imaginable for the public. But by the early 1920s, this magnificent triumph of engineering had become a terrifying existential threat to corporate survival. To understand why, we must look to Germany, to the massive lighting giant Osram. Between 1922 and 1923, Osram experienced a catastrophic, unparalleled collapse in their business. Their sales plummeted dramatically from a staggering 63 million bulbs to a mere 28 million in just one single year. The market was completely saturated. Why? Because the products they were selling were simply too good. They lasted entirely too long. Consumers bought a bulb, screwed it into the socket, and never needed to return to the store for a replacement. The great minds of industry realized they were engineering themselves out of business. It was a corporate death spiral caused entirely by hyper-efficient, highly durable products. The realization struck absolute fear into the hearts of executives across the globe. If this trend continued unchecked, the global lighting industry would completely collapse under the weight of its own excellence. A radical, unprecedented intervention was urgently required. They needed to find a way to make their products fail, and they needed to do it together in absolute secrecy. The dark solution to this looming industrial crisis was born in the dead of winter. On December 23, 1924, the world's most powerful lighting executives converged on Geneva, Switzerland. The heavy, ozone and cigar-scented air of the boardroom was thick with tension, greed, and ruthless ambition. Outside, the snow-capped Swiss Alps provided a strictly neutral backdrop for an unprecedented act of corporate warfare. Inside, heavily suited figures like William Meinhardt, the brilliant but desperate chairman of Osram, and Anton Philips, the pragmatic mastermind who co-founded the Dutch behemoth Philips & Company, took their seats around a massive oak table. They were joined by representatives from Tungsram, Associated Electrical Industries, and covert proxies for the American giant, General Electric. Together, this clandestine international syndicate incorporated what they called Phoebus SA, effectively birthing the Phoebus Cartel on January 15, 1925. Their primary, shadowy objective was not simply traditional price fixing, but something far more insidious. They explicitly agreed to implement a systematic, scientifically enforced limitation of technological potential. The cartel aggressively standardized the incandescent light bulb's lifespan to a strict, non-negotiable limit of exactly 1,000 hours. At the time, the industry average was well over 2,500 hours. Anton Philips was a particularly loud advocate for this planned obsolescence scheme, infamously warning his elite peers that after strenuous efforts to escape the era of long-life lamps, it was of the greatest importance not to sink back into the same mire by providing prolonged life products. The global consumer was about to become trapped in a carefully designed web. Mandating a significantly shorter lifespan in a smoky boardroom was one thing. Actually executing it required a complete perversion of the scientific method. Engineers, men who had dedicated their entire lives to pushing the boundaries of human invention, were suddenly handed a deeply unethical paradox. Brilliant figures like Klaus Wetzel, Osram's chief technology director, were tasked with utilizing their advanced technical genius not to innovate forward, but to reverse engineer a product to fail predictably, reliably, and inevitably. Cyanotype blueprints of early tungsten filaments were meticulously redrawn and scrutinized. The internal wire construction was deliberately made delicate, specifically engineered to withstand a precise amount of electrical current for exactly 1,000 hours before cleanly snapping in the dark. For decades, defenders of the Phoebus Cartel have peddled the so-called efficiency defense. They have argued that this artificial 1,000-hour limit was a purely technical necessity, claiming that operating a tungsten filament for longer periods caused it to degrade, blackening the glass and consuming far more electricity while producing significantly less light. However, historical scrutiny reveals a drastically different reality. The cartel's internal actions violently contradict this benevolent energy-saving narrative. The ultimate focus was never on saving electricity for the consumer. It was entirely about ensuring a continuous, inescapable cycle of purchasing. The cartel aggressively suppressed any innovation that favored durability, completely regardless of the bulb's energy efficiency. They were actively transforming a durable, lifelong good into a perpetually consumable commodity. Engineering failure became a highly prized corporate science, laying the sinister, invisible groundwork for the disposable society we currently inhabit. To blindly enforce this monumental conspiracy, the Phoebus Cartel established an infrastructure of absolute draconian control, heavily overseen by the ominously named 1,000-Hour Life Committee. At the very heart of this enforcement was a secret, centralized Swiss testing laboratory located in Geneva. The atmosphere inside this facility was highly oppressive and deeply industrial. It was dominated by a deafening, continuous hum of alternating current and the blinding, agonizing glare of thousands of naked filaments burning simultaneously on massive wooden testing racks. Technicians meticulously logged the exact life of each bulb. The intensely hot environment was punctuated only by the sharp, brittle pop of engineered death as bulbs systematically burned out at their meticulously designated hour. If a manufacturer's bulb dared to exceed the 1,000-hour limit, the cartel struck swiftly with severe financial penalties. The financial matrix of failure was astonishingly bureaucratic. A typed 1929 internal matrix document specifically listed exact escalating Swiss franc penalties based purely on exceeding hours. It was, in essence, a direct and heavy tax on product longevity. For example, a company was fined a quarter of a Swiss franc per bulb for each 100 hours it burned over the strict limit. The cartel was so dangerously obsessed with total market dominance that members were doubly punished. They were heavily fined for making bulbs that lasted too long and heavily penalized for selling too many bulbs overall, ensuring strict market share quotas were never violated. This ruthless systemic enforcement even inspired fiction, echoing directly in Thomas Pynchon's cult classic novel, Gravity's Rainbow, featuring hitmen hunting immortal anomalies.
While the European executives operated somewhat openly within the safety of Swiss neutrality, the primary American participant required a much more sophisticated cloak of corporate invisibility. General Electric, acutely aware of the sweeping, punitive powers of the Sherman Antitrust Act in the United States, carefully avoided putting its primary domestic corporation on the cartel's founding documents. Instead, General Electric maintained extreme plausible deniability by operating entirely through a complex network of overseas group proxies and its highly powerful subsidiary, International General Electric. They maintained a pristine, unblemished facade of domestic innocence while quietly reaping immense global financial rewards from the 1,000-hour standard. This highly lucrative, artificially manipulated international market operated smoothly until the late 1930s. In 1939, the catastrophic outbreak of the Second World War fundamentally disrupted international trade routes, communication channels, and corporate alliances, leading to the informal, messy dissolution of the Phoebus Cartel as an active administrative body. Yet, the toxic philosophy they successfully implanted continued to thrive. Between 1942 and 1953, the United States government initiated a massive, grueling antitrust lawsuit directly against General Electric. The resulting 1953 judicial ruling finally ripped away the curtain, fully exposing GE's covert orchestration and deep, undeniable entanglement within the global cartel structure. The courts explicitly revealed how international corporate power had conspired to deliberately shortchange the American consumer. But despite this monumental legal victory and the massive public exposure of the cartel's deceptive practices, the deeply entrenched industry standard of the 1,000-hour light bulb remained stubbornly, permanently intact.
The powerful men who gathered in that smoky Geneva boardroom in 1924 are long gone, but the shadowy legacy of the Phoebus Cartel continues to rigidly dictate the terms of our daily lives. They did not just violently shorten the life of a single glass bulb, they successfully engineered the very DNA of modern consumer capitalism. The cartel undeniably proved, on a massive, unprecedented global scale, that vast fortunes could be made by intentionally designing products to fail. This century-old strategy of planned obsolescence became the secret, unshakable foundation of our modern economic system. Today, we are completely surrounded by the ideological descendants of the 1,000-hour light bulb. It is embedded in the modern smartphone with a sealed battery that degrades precisely after 2 years of use. It is in the expensive washing machine built with cheap plastic gears that shatter just days after the warranty expires. It is in the rapidly produced fast fashion garments designed to completely fall apart after a single season of wear. The Phoebus Cartel drafted the ultimate corporate blueprint to keep the global consumer wheel spinning endlessly, forcing ordinary people to constantly buy replacements for items that, with slightly better engineering, could have easily lasted a lifetime. As we look back at the glowing, enduring carbon filament of the Centennial light in California, we are profoundly reminded of the divergent, sustainable path we were forced to abandon. We live in a world carefully engineered to break, a fragile reality constructed by a secret cartel that decided unending profits were vastly more important than permanence.